Welcome to Women Working in Wealth from the American College Center for Women in Financial Services. Join us as we showcase unique career opportunities and dispel myths surrounding the financial services profession through conversations with industry leaders.
Here we are again. I'm your host, Lindsey Lewis. I am the director and chair of the Center for Women in Financial Services at the American College. We have an incredibly amazing guest today. I am pleased to introduce Chia-Li Chien. Chia-Li is not only the Succession Program Director at the Value Growth Institute, she is also a financial planning professor at California Lutheran University and the American Management Association. Another notable flex is that Chia-Li holds 2 master's degrees, one being from the American College. She also has earned her PhD from the American College. She completed her dissertation on real-life census data on retirement success that is state-specific based on Social Security and/or reverse mortgages. So we should appropriately call her Dr. Chien. Now, let's get into our conversation with Chia-Li. Thank you so much for being here today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
We are just absolutely thrilled, especially to have an alumna of the college, and with all of your education and background, it's a true honor. I would love to get started with your money story and how it's shaped you personally and professionally.
Sure. I was born and raised in Taipei, Taiwan. And so when I was very young in the grammar school, I remember it was probably the first grade, second grade, that we had a program. And I did not know if it was a testing program because all of my siblings didn't have that program I did. And that program was every week. Initially, we were given a savings book. And every week, that however much that you want to save, you hand it in to your teacher, and we individually have to document how much we save. We have to sum up the total every week. And toward like the middle of the semester, I remember I was in charge of collecting those books and collecting the money and then hand it to the teacher. And that was my earliest remember how to save money. And it really doesn't matter how much you save. They're doing a couple of things. I learned how to save. I learned how to do math. And I also learned how to persistently doing something so boring, even though that wasn't really necessarily a very interesting thing to do for a tiny little kid. But the fact was that every student has a savings book and everyone was able to do something about it. It really do kind of shape how I see savings from a behavioral perspective. And when I was a little bit older, my mom I have 3 other siblings, so my mom gave each one of us allowance. And our job was to determine how much we're going to spend for breakfast, lunch. And by the way, we don't have like the lunch and breakfast program like in the US. Each one of the students have to bring their own lunch and breakfast, if you will. My mom was very independent, very career woman-wise. So she wanted to make sure that we know how to take care of ourselves. So after several weeks, I realized that I don't necessarily have to spend every dollar my mom gave us. I could do something a little bit more creative. For example, and we have to do dishes. Every night I have to do dishes, in which I complained when I was very little. But I realized that there were a lot of leftovers every day from dinner. And I thought, well, how about I just pack these for my lunch so I can save the money for lunch because I have something that I want to buy. So I figure that way I can actually save that money without asking mom for dollars to buy things that I want. And so over time, it was incredible how much money that I stashed away. And one day, my elder brother, actually was so angry and told my mom that my mom shouldn't give me any more money because apparently I don't need it. But it was very interesting that those 2 things that kind of shaped me in terms of how to budget, how to save, how to plan ahead, because I have something that I want to buy, so I plan ahead. In such a young age, it really, really actually not only shaped me personally, it also gives me a good concept about how to manage money personally, as well as in the business environment where if you work for a company, or if you have your own company, it actually do reshape how I see money. So hopefully that's the answer that you're looking for.
That is absolutely incredible. I think, the United States definitely needs to come up to par with that and start that savings process with elementary school kids, right? Obviously, it was really impactful for you. If we have any listeners that are parents or educators out there, get them started young. I loved how your allowance really taught you the basics of financial planning and budgeting and saving and prioritization, and really created a nice money story and a money narrative that many people don't have. And so it's really incredible to see how it's shaped you. Well, watching an interview with you, I would love to hear about your career journey, because obviously you were in Taiwan, now you're in the United States. So tell us how that has evolved and developed.
Most of the advisors that I know of, I think that they're all very fortunate in terms of how they come across in planning. I actually was a career changer. So prior to the financial planning profession, I was working in a Fortune 100 company as a corporate financial system senior director. I oversaw about a team of 176 people. Obviously, with that kind of responsibility, I was very stressed out, very exhausted, not to mention that I actually, to a point that I didn't know what I want to do in the future. I mean, it was a very nice, high-paying job, but there's just a lot of pressure. And one day I was fortunate enough to run into a certified financial planner. That must be faith. I don't know how to explain that. And so I ended up having hired this CFP to do a comprehensive plan for me. And just to answer two questions, because that was at the time that I wasn't quite sure what I want to do yet for life. And so I asked him, can you, when you do the planning, just find out, number one, can I afford to make a career change? Because making a career change means that I have to start from scratch. And that years and years of my experience in corporate finance system would just kind of, go away. But I wanted to be sure that I can actually afford to do that. And second question I asked him to do is, while you were at it, find out if I can actually retire early, and how early can I do that? Because if I don't have to work, I don't want to work. And it was fascinating to watch the entire planning process with him. That's where I realized I want to do what he is doing, because it's so fascinating. And he's actually helping me solve these questions. Can I afford? Now, obviously, I was looking at from an affordability perspective to do a career change, but I just kind of fell into this planning process, didn't realize that I absolutely loved that process. So what happened after that was it took me about 3 years to save up 4 years worth of working capital, because I knew that I wanted to start my own firm. But one of the criteria that I have was I need to have my CFP just like him first before I quit and do this, because that kind of shows me I could do this, right? I can technically do this. And so I did. I passed my CFP within a very, very short period of time. And I left that company, then became affiliated with SageMark Consulting, which is part of Lincoln Financial Group, for about 6 years. And I was their Rookie of the Year at the very, very beginning when I first entered the industry. And then I decided that I did not want to have that kind of business model to do my business. So I left the broker-dealer network in terms of that business model. Then I started doing fee for advice, fee only since 2009, servicing only business owners on the succession program management. And as a matter of fact, many of my business owner clients include many financial advisor firms. So throughout my consulting, coaching, and managing succession program for many business owners, I get invited a lot from my clients to speak to their executive teams, to speak to their employees and things like that. And I realized I love teaching too. So today I kind of dabble in two areas. I do teach. I ran a financial planning program for California Lutheran University. At the same time, I still have my succession management program helping many business owners out there. But I'm very, very selective in terms of who I work with. So my career journey is not necessarily a straight shot. I went into financial planning and then have a very successful business. I did, but I kind of changed and changed again. But I think that the lesson learned there is there's not necessarily a one direction that everyone needs to go through. If you see opportunity, grab it. If you see changes that you have to make them. And so that's kind of my journey up to this point.
We cannot just roll past the fact that you took the CFP so quickly. That is a tough exam. And obviously it just illustrates how bright you are in order to, pass that exam and how much foresight you had to plan in advance, right? That career change, you knew exactly what you needed to do. And big shout out to your advisor who really took that to heart and really did an excellent job from your planning strategy. Let's take a quick break.
At the American College Center for Women in Financial Services, we're promoting the advancement of women in the industry through research, education, and awareness. Become one of our Women Working in Wealth ambassadors, keep up with our latest news and events, and learn how you can help break the bias at womencenter.theamericancollege.edu.
I loved how it is such an evolution, right? You started at one place and then you kind of pivoted and you found your lane, your niche. So maybe just explain what business succession planning is for our listeners that may not know what that means.
So before we talked about business succession, I'm going to kind of just backtrack a little bit about where did that actually start. So if we look at the entire US from small and privately held businesses perspective, according to the Small Business Administration, and I wrote that in my first book, that in general, in the US, the privately held businesses, about a third will sell to third party, and about another third will sell internally, and about a third will close without even have the opportunity to cash out. So from a succession perspective is that we need to understand the landscape of the business first before we talk about what that is. So the folks that sell to third party, we tend to call that external transfer. The folks that sell to internally, we tend to call that internal transfer. And so there are approximately about 27 different transfer channels available to any business owners out there. And so for internal transfer, they tend to need to have succession program in place. For those people who are transfer externally, then you need to have exit plan in place, as well as potentially some succession planning in place. Succession planning generally has three parts. First is about customers' succession. The second is about employee succession. The third part is the equity partner successions. Unfortunately, majority of the business owner only know equity partner succession because that's how they kind of focus on how much I need to get out of this firm that I built, things like that. And most people also don't know that the value of a practice or a business really are tightly connected with all these three areas. So if you just focus on purely on the monetary transfer, you probably won't be able to get the most out of it. And so I think the number one mistake that I've seen after so many years working with business owner is time. What I mean by that is people tend to run out of time. They tend to use a shotgun approach when they approach the exit or the succession. They oftentimes, I will run into business owners tells me that, hey, business is just not where it's supposed to be compared to where I started. Therefore, I just wanted to sell this business. And oftentimes when you're doing that, you're not having a very good proposition to liquidate that business. It's actually not necessarily good. And sometimes the most problem that I see, if time is a problem, oftentimes business owners have missed that windows of opportunity to sell, because business, just like any real estate that you know of, there is a good time to buy, there's a good time to sell, just like any stock that you know of. If you miss that window of opportunity, you probably will not get the most out of it. As a matter of fact, the statistics that I just gave you, right? Most people will think that, okay, I just wanted to sell to a third party then. If that's not that much trouble, I'm just going to put the for sale sign on in front of my business. That will solve the problem. So as a matter of fact, for the past 10 years or so, statistic has shown 12 to 15% of those business that was listed never even sold. So given the fact that we know, sure, you can sell to a third party, but you still have a chance that not able to sell. Therefore, I always encourage people, time is your best friend. Plan early, know what you want to do in terms of what's best for you, best for your employees, best for your customers, best for your families, and your equity partners. Plan early, then you can get the most out of it. And the succession planning in general, if planned well, it may take years to go through. Even if you don't plan succession, if you just wanted to sell to a third party, just the due diligence itself may take up to 24 months. So time really is in the essence of the owner's discretion. I would say that do that as early as possible. So hopefully that answers your questions about succession planning.
I just learned so much myself. And, I think a lot of business owners definitely go towards that equity component. We all watch Shark Tank, so that's where our mind's at. But thinking about your customers and your employees, and, you don't want to leave your customers in a lurch or your employees. You did mention quite a bit about time. So when should, if I'm a financial planner practitioner, when should I start advising if I have a small business owner client to start thinking about it, right? You mentioned for a third party, we need at least 24 months, for the due diligence part. But let's say I have this relationship. Is it right at inception of the business? Is it, once we get a little bit of cash flow, kind of what's a nice rule of thumb? There might not be a right answer, but let us know.
Right. There may not be a right answer for you because every business and business owners are so unique in their situation. But what I would say is that the advisors need to think about their own succession first before helping their clients, right? What do I mean by that is oftentimes that the shoemaker's son don't have shoes. And so I think that the owners that you are advising can tell if in fact you have a plan in place. That's a little bit easier to advise. So that's number one I will recommend. Ideally, any owner started the business should have some sort of end in mind, right? So ideally, when you first started, you wanted to know what at the end should look like. But that's not realistic because at the very beginning of your business or any startup business, everyone is all focusing about, I wanted to get revenue, I want to get profits and things like that. So, and over time, you're just very, very consumed in growing the business, which is a good problem to have. But in general, this is just my experience. It doesn't necessarily is a statistic. This is just the number of clients that I work with in general. If you are in the business for 10 to 20 years, about 10 to 20 years, this is not a bad time to start. Or if you are in the age between 45 and 55. So your business is still mature enough and you are still young enough that you can have the flexibility to do some planning, to do something with your business. So then you can see what will be the biggest opportunity for you, then you don't miss that window. So take last year, this recent pandemic that we were in, as an example, many businesses went out of business because of that. It doesn't necessarily mean that they didn't have any planning in place, but the point here is that if you plan properly, you would have some sort of continuity plan in place. And although the economics could blow your plan away, but at least you have a plan in place. So I would say in general, if you're in the business for about 10 to 20 years, in the age between 45 and 55, then it's a good time to think about it. Oftentimes, what I ran into is that the business owner is either too late in the process or too old in the process or too behind in their industry that they completely miss the window of the opportunity to sell.
I think it's so important to understand those windows of opportunity. And as advisors, right, we need to make sure that we think about our own firm succession planning because, sometimes we role play these worst case scenarios with our clients and we don't even think about like our own disability, death, continuity plan, et cetera. So I want to shift gears slightly because we talked about kind of your succession planning, want to talk about your teaching. So the question I have for you is, how does education play a role in career development and how has it played a role in yours?
I believe education is some sort of a structured learning that sometimes help all of us being curious. And being curious is the key to learn, and it's a key to any education programs. Because if you're not curious enough, or you think that you know everything, there's nothing to learn. But I do have to admit that, as you mentioned earlier in the introduction, I'm kind of like a groupie of the American college. You have a master's degree and you keep going with a PhD. And many of my friends are like that. And it's all because all of us have this curiosity about that we wanted to learn something. We wanted to make sure that we know so then we can help our clients. We also wanted to know that if we know better, we might potentially avoid so many different types of mistakes. So I believe that no matter how successful one could be, I believe that education plays a significant role of improving how you solve problems, how you innovate. And I believe solving problem and innovation all probably driven from this curiosity where the education plays a huge component to it. And without innovation, without that ability to adapt to changes, having all these knowledge, you won't be able to survive in any career unless you're working for the government. And that's a different story. But still, even if you work for the government, you still need to have some sort of innovation skill. So I truly believe that education plays a significant role in anyone's career development.
Well, we will take all the American college groupies we can get. So we definitely love having you here. Let's take a quick break.
Want to join our community of women working in wealth? Follow us on your social media platform of choice at Women Working in Wealth to stay informed about upcoming events, industry developments, and our fellow flock members making waves in the field. We hope you'll join us in our mission to break the bias.
I loved your points around innovation and problem solving. You mentioned, earlier in your money story around, starting at earlier ages, and then you were a career pivoter. So maybe describe for our listeners the advantages of studying financial planning as a career earlier rather than later.
Obviously, I didn't get given that opportunity to study in financial planning, right? The financial planning wasn't necessarily a major that you can study in when I started out. I believe that today's students are so incredibly lucky to have financial planning, either in undergraduate or in graduate school, or even just go through the certificate program that American College has so many of. I believe that the financial planning or financial services has the stickiness effect, which means that it's an effect that makes people feel very rewarding when they help people, and that kind of produce endorphin from your brain. And that is a really, really rewarding experience, at least for me and for many of my clients, and as well as many of my colleagues in the industry. But starting early in financial planning, meaning that either a financial planning minors or financial planning major, it really can kind of enhance yourself, even if you don't go into the industry. Think about how much you can apply what you learn into your own experience. I remember when I first started out studying the financial planning, preparing for the CFP exam, while I was still in the corporate, really nice cushion job, that I was in the executive role. I was able to apply every single strategies that I learned from financial planning into my incentive stock option grant, applying to investing and applying into estate planning and things like that. So I think that starting early with the financial planning, even if you don't go into the field, you could still use that application into your personal situation. And if you do happen to love the industry like I do, and many of us do, then that could actually give you a boost of, you don't necessarily need to relearn that technical skill when you enter the profession. You could just focus on your communication, leadership, client-facing skills. That kind of give you a boost if you have that training at the college or a graduate school. And I think that, and I'm probably biased about this, I believe that financial services and financial planning probably is one of the most recession-proofed career, other than physicians. People get sick, so physician always tells me that they have the most recession-proof career. I do believe that people in the financial services or financial planning profession also have that. Think about any economy downturn, people get scared. Who do they want to go to for advice? Advisors, right? So people always going to have need to deal with money, and everyone going to retire at some point at their life. So there's always space, there's always opportunities in the financial planning profession. So therefore, I believe starting early is probably your best bet. And if you didn't have a chance to start early, like a late bloomer like me, you could always catch up. This is something that everyone could learn. And even if you don't go into the industry, you can still tremendously benefit from what you learn and apply to your personal situation.
The knowledge itself is so powerful at enhancing your own life. And you touched on how rewarding the career can be and how it's service oriented, and that there are so many opportunities. There's trillions of dollars of wealth that's transitioning over the next couple of decades. So that is job security for financial planners. So you mentioned that you teach. So tell us what is rewarding to you about teaching and why you love it so much.
I believe that, everyone has a purpose in this life. I believe that I am a connector by nature. What I mean by connector is I love to help students connect the dots in their financial planning concepts. And outside of the classroom, I like to connect the dots from people to students that they may need help. For example, they might need to have someone in the industry to guide them as a mentor, or they may want to have some sort of career advice, or they might need some sort of strategy that they haven't really figured out what to do yet. So I believe that that's my purpose. I help students and I help people to connect those dots. And the most rewarding aspect about teaching for me is the rewards of seeing students actually excel in the career. So for example, I have a student who entered the financial planning program, a master's degree program. He was at the time really just focusing on selling financial products, but he knew that he wanted to make a change to kind of move up and not necessarily stay away from the financial planning products, but he wants to learn how to do planning and so on and so forth. So he passed his CFP and then earned his MBA in financial planning. Immediately after that, he got a huge promotion, not just within the company. He, as a matter of fact, moved into a fee only, and this is one of the largest fee only firm in the Bay Area. And today he is a top lead advisor for that company. But not just there. He didn't just go through this entire process just to get a nice career. He is so down to earth. He did so many pro bono projects with me while he was in the program and after the program. We were able to help companies, nonprofit organization company locally. And not only that he did that, he also helped doing a little bit of research of that project. And he ended up became a co-author with me in one of the research projects. And the story hasn't stopped there. We ended up getting invited to speak about that entire pro bono project experience at a CFP Register conference late last year, way after he graduated. And that was a really incredible, rewarding feeling that it's hard to describe for people, because I was so, and still very, very proud of every one of my students, because they not only able to accomplish, passing a CFP is great, having a degree is great, but they still have heart outside of all that, helping other people and help other young generation coming through. And so I think that rewarding aspect of teaching is really hard to describe in terms of watching the students excel in the career and also watching them able to pay it forward in their own community. That is just incredible things for me to enjoy, to watch. And I'm very proud of every single one of my students.
That is so beautiful that you get to see that purpose and mission-driven work, and that you have the autonomy to do both this succession planning and teaching, and really teach people around evergreen curiosity and career growth and potential and connecting those dots, right? Taking you from A to B. So next question for you is, you talked about this gentleman that you've helped grow their career. So what's a business case for women that want to enter this industry, and why should they be interested in a path in financial planning?
Right. So for a lot of women planners out there or advisors out there, they oftentimes will tell me that, well, this career is fabulous. It's flexible. You get to control your time. You get to call the shots, and there's so many other benefits. That's all true. But I think that the industry itself has so many different ways that you can go into. It doesn't have to necessarily always being in the front working with the clients. For example, this lady that I know of in Charlotte for many years, she started out as an agent associate. What I mean by that is she's just an assistant for a life insurance agent. And so she worked in that office for several years. And then she moved to another sort of insurance agent company, started testing a little bit about recruiting side. And then she moved to a next company on the recruiting side. Today, she's probably the largest firm in Charlotte area. She's not only a managing principal of the firm, she's also the director of recruiting. So the point for that story is that a lot of times we don't need to set our goal in just becoming an advisor. Oh, that has sales component. I don't want to go into the industry. But the point is that there's so many different ways. I've seen very successful women advisors that they're serving back office in a very top large insurance company or financial services company. And I also seen very, very successful planners that have their practice, large practice. So there's so many different ways that you could do in this particular business. Just like me, I pivot so many times, and ultimately you have to find your happy spot. And I think that just being open-minded, give it a try. And I do believe that the best way to help women is get a mentor, have someone who's been through it, lead you through that process. They may potentially guide you through where that you haven't think about. So I really do encourage women in general, just have a mentor. And once you become somewhat reasonably successful, mentor somebody else. I have 3 mentees in any given time. And I think that's the best way to still get involved and become a role model for someone else. And so I definitely encourage every woman to at least think about it. If you're not sure, work with a mentor.
It is so important to realize that there are so many different niches that are in financial services, and that there's an evolution that happens. So you could be client facing, then you might go back office, and then you might go back to client facing, and it just ebbs and flows. And I love the advice around getting a mentor, but also giving back, right? Once you have your feet on the ground, find someone that you can mentor. So I have enjoyed our time today. I've learned so much. I just would love to end with one last question for you, Chia-Li. So if you could rewind the clock and go back to 18, 20-year-old Chia-Li, what advice would you give her?
Well, I am very stubborn, so I don't know if whatever I gave myself that I would take it. But if I could do that, I would say that always trust your gut and listen to your intuition. And the reason I said that was the more we age nicely, right? The more we age, the more conditioned we are in terms of thinking. And oftentimes, because of that, we don't necessarily truly listen to our gut, truly listen to what our intuition is telling us. And so what I would say is that if I were to do that to my 18-year-old self, I would absolutely making sure that my antennas up all the time, make sure I listen to my gut, listen to my intuition, because I did make mistake before. I totally did not listen to my own intuition. I regret it so many years. And therefore, I think that having the ability to find that inner voice, whether or not it comes from your gut, comes from your intuition, be sure to listen to it and just trust them and move forward with that.
What an important reminder for us to listen to our gut, listen to our intuition so that we can make those great decisions. Well, for our listeners that want to stay in contact with you, what is the best way to stay connected with you, Chia-Li?
Yes, you can find me in LinkedIn. Obviously, you could just look for ChiaLi Chien. You'll be able to find me in LinkedIn.
Perfect. We have appreciated your time so much, and we thank you for being here and being our special guest.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us, and please leave a rating and review. To keep up with future episodes, subscribe to our show and follow us at our Women Working in Wealth social channels. This has been Women Working in Wealth, brought to you by the American College of Financial Services.